Good morning. Trying to get this video started here with my screencastify. Today you are going to be doing a lesson on bias versus unbiased samples. You should have a note-taking page with that looks like slides from our slideshow from today. I'm going to ask that you write down any notes from this video and from the PowerPoint, and just record it. It's going to go into your, not your math journal, but into your binders in the math section. So what are biased versus unbiased samples? Well, this has to do with statistics. This is our final unit that we're going to do this year. Statistics is basically collecting and analyzing data. You collect and analyze data basically through surveys and through questions that people might call you over the phone to get a survey. Sometimes you might get stopped at a grocery store. Sometimes you might just go into an ice cream store and you fill out a survey. So that's part of statistics, just collecting data. There's two ways to do it, or one way is to think about a population. The population would be like the whole entire group being studied. For example, like our whole school would be a population. The whole community would be a population. The whole Chatham County would be a population. Then, of course, the state of North Carolina would be a large population. But then the sample is just part of the population. So you would want to do some random selections there of just a sample. So the 7th grade at Bonnley would be a sample of the whole school. Our school would be a sample of all of Chatham County. Chatham County would be a sample of the whole population of North Carolina. So your sample is just a smaller unit of your population. And of course, a survey is a question or set of questions designed to gain information about the population as a whole. So just make sure that when you're writing this down, if it's not on your paper, then that means in a provided spot, you need to have it written down so that your note-taking page looks like the one that you see here on the screen. Let's see. Oops. Can I go to a new screen? There we go. So here's what we mean. By just for each of the survey topics, so we're going to determine whether each phrase describes a population or a sample. All right, so how many hours a night do you study? So if we ask 25 randomly selected 7th graders, then of course that would be, see what that would be. That would be a sample because you're only asking a select few of the 7th grade instead of the whole 7th grade. All of the students in the middle school will, of course, be a population because you have a larger number there. What is the town's favorite flavor of ice cream? If you ask the residents of the whole town, obviously that would be a population. Just the customers at a local ice cream shop. Yep, if you said sample, that would be correct. Let's do another one. Who should be the mayor of our city? Obviously, we do that on the first Tuesday of November during election time. If you only ask 350 residents outside of City Hall, of course, that would be just a sample. It's a small portion that would represent the whole entire population. All the residents of the city, obviously, that would be the population because it's a larger number there. All right, so whenever you do these surveys, you just have to make sure whether you're doing the whole population or if you're just doing a sample. Most of the time, you can't call up every single person within Chatham County and ask them questions if you're taking a survey. You'd have to have a lot of help doing that. So sometimes you just have to take a small sample. So when you take that small sample, instead of using the whole population, you just have to make sure that it is an unbiased sample. Like you want to make sure your data covers both sides. So an unbiased sample is when you're just using a valid sampling method that is random and is representative of the population. So if we were asking about cafeteria food, an unbiased sample would be, we would ask car riders and bus riders, and maybe that every fourth or fifth student that walked in through the front doors in the morning time. A bias sample is when a sample is not representative of the population. So let's say if we're doing a survey about the cafeteria and the favorite foods, if we only surveyed maybe seventh graders that ate food in the cafeteria, or seventh graders obviously that maybe didn't eat food in the cafeteria, that might be a little bit biased. So if you want a true data to look at, or true sample of data, you need to make sure it's like a random choosing, and it gets a good portion of it represents a good portion of the population. All right, so here's some examples. So we're going to read each situation, decide if the sample is biased or unbiased. So all of the middle school students that rode bicycles to school are surveyed. So if you're doing this type of survey, do you think that'd be biased or unbiased? That would be biased. And the reason why is that you're just surveying students that rode bicycles to school. A social media poll is sent to all middle school students, and a winner is chosen from participants. What do you think, biased or unbiased? Yes, that's biased. And the reason why is because a winner is going to be chosen from the participants. And also, social media polls are not really good to do because, one, not everybody has social media, and or two, they might not have internet access. And then three, some people do have would have access to it, but they just might not want to participate. Sometimes just like one of those emails you just don't click on or read. All right, if we surveyed every ninth student that walks through the cafeteria doors is surveyed, that is an unbiased. Let's see, every person in the culinary section of the bookstore on a Monday is surveyed. Monday evening is surveyed. That's a little bit tricky there. It is biased. And the reason why it's biased is because you're only asking people in the culinary section. If you, and only on a Monday night. If you ask like every third person that came into the bookstore every evening of the week, that would not be biased. All right, so let's look at this one. A 7th grade homeroom was surveyed to determine how many Texas students are at Olin Intermediate Middle School send each day. So what could be, or what is the population here? What would that be? Yep, it's all the students in the school. What would be the sample? Just students in the 7th grade homeroom that was surveyed. So would you consider this biased or unbiased? Most definitely biased, because if you only do one class of 7th graders, that's not accurately representing all students in the school. So if you wanted to have a survey that is more unbiased, that's when you would do every third person that came through, through the door that morning, or you randomly choose maybe 10 people from each classroom to participate in the survey. Here's another one. To track mitigation patterns of a particular species of bird, scientists randomly tag, release, and track 50 birds of that species. So what's going to be the population? Obviously, it's the species of birds being studied. So what's going to be the sample? Absolutely, just the 50 birds that the scientists tagged. So would this be biased or unbiased? Yeah, this would be unbiased because the birds tagged were randomly selected. It just wasn't certain ones. It was just randomly done. So that would be an unbiased. All right, if you were taking a survey of the different colors of leaves seen in September, decide for each situation if it would be a biased or unbiased sample. All right, 100 fallen leaves collected from the ground. I'm going to say bias. Yeah. I know it looks, you think, well, why would that be biased if they just collected leaves off the ground? But sometimes the same color of leaves might fall faster than the other ones, so that might just be a little bias there. 50 fallen leaves and 50 leaves on the branches, that's going to be unbiased. This kind of gives a mixture of leaves that have and have not fallen, and it doesn't specify a certain type of tree either. And then if we had 50 fallen oak leaves and 50 oak leaves on branches, that would be considered biased because we're only looking at oak leaves. So it might not represent the areas, the trees in the whole entire area. All right, you want to estimate the number of 7th grade students that walk home right after school in the springtime. Decide for each situation if it would be a biased or unbiased sample. All right, let's see. 7th grade members of the modified track team. If they walk home right after school, I would say that would be biased. Yes, because they stay after school for practice in the spring. So, yes, you're only looking at a certain number of students there instead of trying to get a broader sampling. 3 7th grade students randomly selected in the hallway before homeroom. Still biased. The sample is too small to make an accurate conclusion. If they had included maybe 3 students from each grade level or from each homeroom, or if you would have said just like the 3rd student walking down the hallway going to homeroom. All right, every 5th student from an alphabetical list of the 7th graders. I would say unbiased. Yes, because if you're doing every 5th student, then that represents the population of 7th graders selected randomly and large enough sample to provide accurate data. Let's see. Oh, I think this is the end of our presentation. So basically from this lesson, I wanted you to get what's the difference between population and a sample, and also what's the difference between bias and unbiased. Okay, so remember, a population is like a whole entire school, where a sample would only be like one class level, and then bias would be you're kind of leaning to one side, or you're just getting opinions just from certain people. And unbiased would be you would get survey and get opinions from a larger group that would truly represent your population. Okay, so here's what I want you to do after this video, and you have completed your notes from the ones that were provided for you, which are just your slides. It's going to go in the math section of your binder. I want you to go to iExcel, and if you go to HH, I don't know where it went. It went away. Let's see if I can get back on. Sorry about that. Here we go. If you go to Learning and Skills, of course, go to 7th grade. And if you go down to HH Statistics, you have 2 things I want you to look at. I want you to look at populations and samples, which it just goes through and you're just making sure you understand what populations and samples are. If you need another example, of course, you have an example there that you can also look at. Okay, that would give you also the definition of population and sample as well. Okay, so you're going to do that iExcel, which is HH populations and samples. And then the other one I want you to do underneath statistics, let me go back to it, is go ahead and do identify representative, random, and biased samples. Okay, and the same thing there. If you have questions or need additional help, you can watch the video, and you can also learn from an example. Okay, So that's what I want you to do for today. Just double check your Google Classroom. Also, you have test corrections that need to be done. If you've turned in all your test corrections, then obviously you can go back here. You can continue to work in iExcel, because some of you still owe me an iExcel sheet. Make sure all assignments have been completed and turned in. Especially anything that's to do with surface area and volume, since we just took those tests. But go ahead and complete those test corrections, complete those 2 assignments in iExcel, and make sure all your notes have been taken. Thanks. Have a good day.